Senator Omidvar.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to Bill S-244, an act to amend the Department of Employment and Social Development Act and the Employment Insurance Act. I would like to thank the sponsor of the bill, Senator Belmar, for bringing this legislation forward. I support the principle of this legislation and encourage senators to move it to committee for further studies. I think we can all agree that increased and better collaboration between employers and employees and their union representatives is good for all, particularly as they are significant stakeholders in the employment insurance system. Senator Belmar uses the terminology of social dialogue to define this process. And social dialogue in labour relations encompasses the process of communication between employers, employees, their representatives, such as unions, and sometimes the government on issues related to labour policies, employment, and working conditions. It is based on the principles of cooperation, mutual respect, and the search of common goals. And the outcome is effective and more harmonious relations where both employers and employees have a voice in the decision-making process on issues that affect them both. It takes place in various forms, including consultations, collective bargaining, and dialogues between government, employers, and employees. Colleagues, I wish to draw your attention to best practices from other parts of the world. The Nordic countries have a strong history of collaboration between trade unions and employers, which has produced high rates of unionization and lower levels of income inequality. In France, social dialogue between unions, employer organizations, and the government is used to negotiate policies and regulations. In Germany, a country I know well, they have requirements for employees to participate in corporate decision-making. In German, this is called Mitbestimmung, or co-determination, and as researchers Bennett Berger and Elena Vaccarino from Bruegel have pointed out, co-determination is deeply rooted in the tradition of German corporate governance and has existed in its current form since the Co-Determination Act of 1976. It has an explicit social dimension. As the German Constitutional Court ruled, co-determination on the company level is meant to introduce equal participation of shareholders and employees in corporate decision-making and complements the economic legitimacy of a firm's management with a social dimension. Co-determination is therefore about democratic decision-making process at the firm level and the equality of capital and work. I think the proof is in the pudding. We know that Germany is the economic heartbeat of Europe. We know that German companies and workers have not suffered. In fact, they've gained because of co-determination. Researchers have pointed out that studies from Germany's experience with co-determination indicate that it leads to less short-termism in corporate decision-making, much higher levels of pay equality, while other studies determine positive results on productivity and innovation. Colleagues, Senator Belmar is using the spirit and the practice of social dialogue in the creation of the Employment Insurance Council. We know that employment insurance is an equal proposition where employees and employers pay into the system. Therefore, it begs to reason that both should have a voice in how it is determined, how the rates are set, and what's the future of the system. I believe that this is overdue. The bill outlines the composition of this new EI Council, its roles and responsibilities, and I agree with much of what the sponsor has included here. 5 representatives from Labour, 5 from employers, being mandatory on the Advisory Council. In addition, Senator Belmar proposes an observing group to include Indigenous representation, and I'm not entirely clear why Indigenous representation is in an observing group and why it is not in the proposed EI Council. I suggest this is something that the committee study. Also not mentioned is how other equity-deserving groups are included in this council. I believe that this is a factor that should be focused on in committee. There is another section of the bill that has not received much attention in this chamber. The bill amends the Department of Employment and Social Development to pull together the powers, the duties, and the functions of the EI Commission, which right now are sprinkled throughout the Act. You have to go on a bit of a fishing expedition to find them. And Senator Belmar's bill brings some efficiency by putting them together in one place. Included in this are monitoring and assessing the assistance provided under the EI Act, reporting annually on its assessment to the minister, who must table it in Parliament, reviewing and approving policies related to the administration of employment benefits or support measures in the Employment Insurance Act, making regulations under this Act, engaging the services of an actuary as described in subsection 28, bracket 4, to perform actuarial forecasts, setting the employment insurance premium rate for each year in accordance with Section 66 of the Employment Insurance Act, etc. I'm frankly a little agnostic on this list of duties, but I do believe it needs to be studied with a great deal of thoroughness at committee. Colleagues, I believe this is an important bill. I think it should be sent to committee to study. Colleagues have already spoken about it, and I urge you to send it to committee as soon as you can. Thank you.